thank you to everyone who is joining us right now. I really hope you're doing well today, and I hope you're excited and ready for a very intriguing conversation, I think, today with the co-authors of Bodybuilding Anatomy. As you see, we have Dr. Mike Israetel and Dr. Christle Guevarra. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate both of you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Normally I would go ahead and kind of read off your bio and kind of explain where you're coming from, but I think it's so much more interesting for the listeners to hear it directly from the source. So if each of you could, kind of give us an idea of the origin story, how you got interested in this field, why you decided to, get into it, and how you got to where you are today.
Oh, you want me to start? Oh gosh, I went to medical school. Had always had an interest in helping people and whatever that meant. Eventually that led me to the path of going to medical school. I also did a teaching fellowship in osteopathic manipulative therapy. So I ended up doing a lot of anatomy teaching as well. And so ended up going into sports medicine because I really loved and enjoyed taking care of athletes. And, while all of that medical medicine stuff was brewing, I always sort of kept my finger on the pulse of the online kind of fitness, nutrition coaching space. And so, for me being, getting interested in powerlifting and then eventually getting into lifting for physique enhancement. So I like to train like a bodybuilder, but I'm not necessarily interested in stepping on stage. Kind of led me towards this path of like eventually getting, to be put on this, awesome project of redoing the book.
Awesome. And
yeah, good answer for me to follow up. I was just a child, all on my own, stranded in this terrible world. And Christle found me, and she's like, do you want to write this anatomy book? And I was like, I don't know who you are. She's like, just get in the van, it'll be fine. Yeah. And here I am. I got into lifting because I did wrestling for a little while. I needed to be stronger for wrestling, and lifting, I fell in love with lifting. I wanted to know more about it because I wanted to get better at it. And I wanted to help other people get better at it. So I went to a lot of school. I trained people in person in New York City as a personal trainer. And then I realized I needed more knowledge. I got a PhD in this stuff, and then wrote a bunch of books, did a bunch of stuff. And then you guys came along and asked if we were willing to do another edition of the bodybuilding anatomy text. And I was like, wow, actually, remember looking at that book and various variations of it when I was growing up. And I was like, this is wonderful. And so myself and Jared Feather and Dr. Christle could have a chance at that was magical. And we said yes a few years ago, and then voila, the book is out today.
Well, I think, definitely everyone watching, listening right now knows your background, knows that you both have an extensive background and knowledge base to be able to talk about all this. So we are talking about bodybuilding, of course. We could jump right into, sets and reps and talk about all that. But for someone that's maybe not as familiar with the science behind hypertrophy, what is most important for them to know?
Yeah, I guess you don't need to know a ton of science if you're trying to go to the gym and lift weights and get bigger. It really only becomes necessary when you run into some trouble and you might not be growing some muscles as much as you would like. Okay. I'd say the basic science of hypertrophy is that if you make a muscle work very hard with relatively heavy loads, relatively close to failure, so it's a 5 to 30 reps, a few reps shy of failure, then it tends to stimulate muscle growth. As long as you are taking in enough calories and protein and getting enough rest and sleep, you're going to grow some muscle. And then it becomes a very intricate process of figuring out for each individual muscle, what is the exercise selection looking like? What is the technique looking like? How many sets do I have to do and how often in order to get my best results? And that's where most of the science comes in to try to give some better than worse answers.
Okay. Dr. Christle, do you have anything? on that?
Yeah, especially somebody who, really, most of the people that I end up working with as patients and clients are kind of on the general population side. I think Mike said it really best as far as like making sure you work real, work that muscle pretty hard. And so, what that looks like is just, even getting to the gym, doing anything for the people who are, very beginner and just new to starting out, in their journey. So just kind of, really it's a process and it really depends on where people's starting points are at. And then kind of working with what they've got and kind of, slowly inching them into, kind of the science of like, you got to get reps, you got to get sets. Man, for a long time, you can really, really milk out those newbie gains just, by going in there and having some sort of structure, but not like to the point of like, if you don't do it like this, then you're gonna, kind of like everything's going to be wrong and you're not going to be a bodybuilder.
Right. Is it, I mean, I'm sure you found over the years, just kind of that misconception on how easy it is to build muscle, especially some of those beginners, and I see you laughing right now, just because people think it's so easy to just go to the gym a few times and build a ton of muscle. So how have you kind of combated some of that, other than just telling people to try it and realize that it's not going to be that easy?
Well, we like to say it's straightforward, but it's not easy. Lifting's not super complicated. It can get complicated if you want super optimal results. But a lot of the times there's a difference between straightforward and easy. And so that means that, you could know how to do something, then doing it's actually quite hard. And the other layer to that is you can do something that's quite hard and expect really big gains,
Mhm.
but only get some moderate gains and kind of think, okay, am I doing anything wrong? And one of the reasons that we wrote this book that we're discussing today is because, like maybe you're doing the exercises wrong, or you're not doing some exercises that could be very effective
Mhm.
for you. And we also have a bit of a descriptor in the book as to how to train generally and all that other stuff. And if you look through that, you can at least cross off that as like a likely way that you're not succeeding. So I think a lot of people, they get into the gym, they do the exercises that hurts them in the good way. It burns and it's really fatiguing. And they kind of look in the mirror for a week or two later and they go, so not a lot's happening. And they go, oh, this is really tough. And it can be tough. But
Mhm.
if you're consistent with it for months and months and months, then you almost certainly see results. Almost doesn't matter who you are. Very few people just don't receive any results in that time. And so I'd say the biggest thing to deal with when you think it's really difficult is to accept, yes, it is really difficult, and I'm here for it. I'm here for months instead of just trying it and being like, well, this is too hard. I didn't get instant gains in the first day.
And one of the things that you do talk about and mention in the book is that stimulus to fatigue ratio. If you could just kind of explain that a little more and just how important that is to take into consideration.
Yeah. So anytime you're training in any kind of way, you're training for a purpose, and that's to get better at whatever it is you're doing. If you're training for tennis, it's to get better at tennis. If you're training for muscle growth, it's to get bigger muscles.
Mhm.
That's the stimulus part. And pretty much all training costs you some kinds of fatigue. And if you can maximize the stimulus and minimize the fatigue, you can either just get better results because fatigue directly interferes biochemically with muscle growth, or you can get even better results by noticing you have less fatigue, you're not really close to your maximum ability to lift even more often, and then you can crank up how much you're doing to get even more stimulus with even less fatigue. For example, let's say you do squats and you do them with in a bad technique.
Okay.
And after 4 sets, your back really kind of isn't feeling great and it's feeling really weak. Your legs feel okay. They appear pretty beat up, but you're not trying to grow your back with squats. You're trying to grow your legs. And so after 4 sets, you kind of shut it down. You're like, my back's had enough of this. But if you improve your technique, maybe look at some of the stuff that we have in this book, all of a sudden, 4 sets later, your back feels great. Your quads feel really cooked, but you're even able to do a fifth set to get even more growth. So not only are your quads growing because you had better technique, which maximized your stimulus to fatigue ratio, but the absolute amount of fatigue is so much lower that you can continue to train even more and get even more gains. So that's one of the ways, at least through technique, that the stimulus to fatigue ratio is really, really important, because two people can get an equivalent amount of muscle growth, but one person worked really hard and got really beat up for it. The other person didn't work as hard and didn't get as beat up.
Mhm.
Man, that's probably the best way to do things. Like you can get across the country in any kind of car, really, on a road trip, But how much gas is it going to cost you? It still go the same distance. The
Yeah.
stimulus is still the same, but the fatigue or the pump at the price at the pump could be like, yeah, double or triple. And that's meaningful, especially if you're a long haul trucker and you want to have this as your job. If you want to put on a lot of muscle, you can't just, get beat to shit in your leg workouts every single time in a way that you're like, oh, like, I've literally had people tell me at the gym that, like, I used to squat, but like my back couldn't take it. And my number one light bulb in my head, usually to myself, is like, I wonder what your technique looked like, and I wonder how well periodized. Crystal, do you ever run into that where people say, I can't do XYZ exercise because of XYZ problem, and you're kind of like,
Oh yeah, yeah. A lot of athletes have tried getting out of like a lifting session because of like, oh, squats make my knees hurt, and I have been like, show me what your squat looks like, and it's just the technique is all wrong for their leverages. Like they're squatting like a 52 kilo female IPF power lifter, with like very narrow stance, and this person's a very tall, long-legged individual, and it's just like that's just not going to work. Like, why don't you try these two things? Like, spread your legs, feet just a little bit further apart. Boom, magically, like the knee pain goes away. They're able to squat, and then all of a sudden you look like this like voodoo magician. And then they're also simultaneously annoyed because now you've just, now your medical excuse has now been
yeah.
removed. See you again.
And now
See you
all
in
of a
the
sudden they
weight
have to do
room.
the entire workout that you wanted them to do anyway.
Right.
There's no getting out of it with you. So you do. I mean, this book does an excellent job of breaking down technique and explaining everything. I mean, we could probably go into a number of gyms and just see people with poor form across the board. Unfortunately, what are some of the more common ones that do cause people quite a bit of problems, especially when they're trying to build muscle?
Crystal, you want to start this one off? What are some kind of common technique, general problems you see?
Gosh, probably this one, my own bias, because I used to do this all the time. I used to bounce out of the hole
Mm.
in the squat. Like I would just dive bomb and then come right back up for years. Not only did that end up giving me a little bit of trouble with my knees at certain point, but then also my I didn't grow any muscle. So it wasn't until Mike, who does a lot of my programming, although most of my programming, told me to slow down, pause at the bottom, that I really started to, grow my quads quite a bit. I also see people doing the same dive bomb thing with bench. Just a lot of dynamic stuff. Too heavy, the grind, so I'm not quite sure, depending on what your, goals are, but a lot of people, just end up doing that out of ego. Let's see. And you want to add to
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
Mike? Those are the two
Oh,
off the top of
that
my
was
head.
great. That was great. One thing that jumps out to me is when people have such inconsistent repetitions, like it looks like they're doing a kind of a modified version of the lift every other rep. And it's especially confusing when they're like, "How's my technique?" And you're like, I'm not sure what you're doing, actually."
Yeah.
It's like seeing someone scribble some writing, and they're like, "What do you think of my handwriting? Like, is this like Egyptian or cuneiform or something? I'd like to know the language I'm analyzing first." And so
Yeah.
that inconsistency kind of means that they have maybe a very general idea of how to move in their head, but they probably need a little bit more specific guidance on, like, this is how you arc the dumbbell, this is where you start the movement, this is where you finish. It doesn't finish halfway before, it finishes all the way at the bottom. What Crystal said is giving people a distinct bottom to kind of pause for a split second and then come back up. She's not rushing out of the hole. You see this a lot with pull-ups. Like,
Mm.
everyone knows intuitively that when you stretch out completely at the bottom of a pull-up, it's really hard to come back up. And so your body's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to kind of bounce out of the hole while not going all the way down. So you get down to like here, and then people come up. And then they're like, well, I can do, 20 pull-ups. And I'm like, what is exactly a pull-up to you? And you see one and you're like, that's pretty good. You see the next one, you're like, that's a different exercise.
Yeah.
So that consistency of technique, which is really kind of having like, there are people in the gym who may be doing the wrong technique, but you can tell based on how they're moving, they're trying to execute a very definitive, meticulous technique. Like, it's just wrong. It's like writing the perfect letter G in handwriting, but you're trying to write a C. Like, at least you're trying to do something, you just have your letters mixed up. When you're writing as a scribble, it's real tough. And so a lot of people, it's very easy to correct them when they're trying to do good technique. They're like, oh, just go lower and let your knees come over your toes more. They're like, oh, wow, I feel it. Then they just keep doing that well, because you understand they're the kind of person that they're already trying to do something consistently, and now you changed it, now it's consistently. The tougher folks to help are the people who have this kind of rushing mindset, and like, I just have to get through the reps, and then each rep kind of ends up being a little wacky and a little different. The arms end up here one time and here one time, and is that a pull down, or is that a wide grip, is that a close grip, who knows? And that kind of stuff gets to be real tough, because you have to do two things with folks like that who ask for your help. I don't just randomly come up to people at the gym unless I'm, trying to offer them candy bars or whatever I'm selling that day. It's real tough, because you have sort of two things you're trying to do. One thing you're trying to do is get them to understand that attention to technique and consistency is a thing. And then you're trying to be like, okay, now here's the consistency and technique I want you to do. It's a two-part problem. Instead of people who already know they need to be doing good technique, but they just might be doing it wrong, those kinds of folks, they could just leaf through the book and be like, oh, this is how to do it. They just go to the gym and probably 95% of the time get it right on the first try. That's the biggest problem we deal with, is not that people don't have good technique, they don't even know what that really is supposed to look like. And that's a little bit bigger of a deal.
I think that's a very fair point. There are different variations of exercises, though. So can you talk about some of those nuances? Like, for example, on a bench press, we could go close grip, we could go wide.
Yes.
Obviously, slightly training different muscles, but at the same time, if that made sense for some people.
Yeah. Christle, what other kind of bench press variations do we know of? We know close, medium,
grip,
wide.
Wide.
There's guillotine style, where you bring the bar close to your neck.
Oh gosh.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's bench press with an arch and retraction, powerlifting style. There's a more flat back bench. There's obviously declines and inclines that you can do. Right. And so all of those options are, like, a lot of them are just really good answers to slightly different questions. So if you want a really big pecs and your triceps are plenty big and you don't want to prioritize those, benching with a wider grip is good, because it really zaps your pecs, very similarly to how a closer grip bench would, but it doesn't tax your triceps, and they're not going to be the limiting factor. So that's a big deal. So a lot of times what we deal with is people will use a good technique, but they'll use a variation of it that doesn't exactly target what they want. Another quick example is people would do stiff-legged deadlifts, call them RDLs or whatever, and sometimes they say they're trying to target their hamstrings, but their knees are still very bent at the bottom, and so the hamstrings don't get pulled in a stretch position. And so you're like, yeah, you're doing the lift, but this is a lot of glutes now, which is great. If you can want to train the glutes, you can do it great with that lift. But when myself and Christle and Jared coach other people in real life, we say, do you want to target your hamstrings? Almost never be like, yes. They're like, okay, great. So really push out your belly, and then really pull your knees back at the bottom, and they're like, oh, holy crap, my hamstrings are frying. And it's like, see, it's still the same lift, just a tiny variations to help target the thing that you want. Because a lot of people go in, and this is not a problem because they get good results. They go in and they say, I want legs, I want big legs. They'll do squats and they'll do deadlifts. Generally, their legs will grow, but there's a difference here when you go from big legs to, like, actually, I need my quads to come up, or my glutes, or my adductors, or my hamstrings. Now, that's a much more specific target. And then you need to think about, okay, not only which lifts am I doing, but which variations of the lifts am I doing? I've heard before people doing bench press, and they're like, I don't really feel my triceps. And I'm like, are you trying to? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God. Well, listen, here's how you do the bench. You keep your elbows close together. You get a really narrow grip. When you come down closer to your upper chest to get that stretch on triceps. They'll try that, and they're like, oh my God, it blows them away. Well, that could be a very different lift almost entirely based on how varied it is from the original.
Yeah. And I think, when have you found then that that's probably the case more often than not, when people are trying to build muscle, they're just doing, maybe they're doing the correct exercise, maybe the wrong variation of it? Is that kind of one of the biggest hurdles?
Christle, have you run into that?
necessarily. It sort of comes out in the wash. I mean, I'm not, for, my sort of demographic, I think, just having a nice, like, baseline level of stuff where, like, I grow everything. I'm not really like, if you're that advanced that you probably need to specialize in something, I'm probably going to refer them to, like, you probably need to talk to Jared Feather, or another, RP coach that specializes in, like, bodybuilding and something a little bit more advanced. So for most of the people that I work with, it's just sort of everything, and with good technique seems to do the job. So that's like the first 5 years of lifting. So
Yeah, Crystal specializes in helping those more beginner folks, and so for her, if you're doing the basic exercise with basic good technique, you're winning in a big way. Whereas with folks that I work with Jared works with, a lot of times they're already big, but they want bigger in specific ways. And then, absolutely, to your point, the variations matter, and even how you execute the variations can matter, because sometimes if you are using some kind of pull down, for example, if you pull with your elbows out at the bottom, it hits kind of upper back area, but doesn't hit your lats as much as you would think. If you pull with your elbows down to the sides, same exercise, same grip width, but where your elbows track can be different, and then it can really grow your lats much more, much less. And so sometimes Jared and I will really, really zone in on people's exercise execution after they've told us, well, I'm struggling to grow XYZ muscle or part of it. Then we'll be like, okay, how do you do this lift? They'll show us, and we're like, okay, here's how you do it for this. And then generally they'll be like, oh, wow, this is great. Or they'll be like, nope, I can't feel that. You guys don't know what you're doing. I want my money back. Or we take them to court. It's this whole big thing. Libel lawsuits. We love to do that.
Hopefully you don't run into too many of those. You brought up a very good point, though. We're working with two sort of different populations of people, like slightly different goals. So I guess, Crystal, from where you're, I guess the clients that you're probably dealing with a little more, and more, I guess, general fitness, we usually recommend maybe 2 days a week to stay on track. For people that you might work with, Mike, probably a much bigger time commitment. So what are people really looking at as far as time commitment, if they have those, excuse me, if they have those larger goals?
Yeah. Crystal, what do you think about the folks that just have like start up and get a good body goals? What do they need to be doing at the gym?
Man, if you're starting from the very, very beginning, I take a look to see what is your life schedule like, and what can you consistently do for, 6 months. Like, let's start there. Let's see what you can do for a week, see how that goes. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and like that amount of hand holding is kind of the most amount of hand holding I will go with. For somebody who's just new to the gym, and I have, worked with people that's the level that we're at, and it's totally awesome. So, 2 days a week is fine. Sometimes they get really excited and they're like, I want to do 5 days a week. I try and reel them back in. That would be, if you can manage to do it, that's awesome. But really the thing I'm looking for is the consistency part. Like, even when work is crazy, your family's driving you nuts, the kids are out of control, like, can you, in that chaotic space, make time for 2 to 3 days a week is where we're at. If it's one, even just fine. Let's start with that and build from there.
I gotta say that's really wise. If you can make 2 half-an-hour lifting sessions consistently every week, you're going to go from person who doesn't train and have any of the benefits of weight training to someone that gets this enormous pile of consistent benefits over and over. Muscularity, your physique will change, you lose fat, your shape will change, your health metrics will become better, your flexibility and mobility will become better, you get all the chronic injuries less often, you're more difficult to get hurt in any way. It's just massive benefits. And I think people assume that, like, well, unless I'm one of these big freak roided up bodybuilder people who sweat all over everything at the gym, I'm just not going to get results. I can't, 2 days a week, half an hour sounds like a scam. And it's not. It's one of those weird things where, like, it really does work to do just a little bit of it. And that's not always the case. There are things that have, like, really, like, big requirements if you're going to do them well. Like, for example, if you want to learn how to speak German, you can't just go on one of these apps for 2 30-minute sessions a week. You'll learn something, but you need, like, conversational immersion to get real good results. Whereas with lifting, it really just does not take much in order to get it going, because once you hit your muscles really hard, but they take days to recover. And then right after you're done, it's another time to go to the gym and hit it really hard. Another way that doesn't work is with endurance training. If you want to get really, really like very proficient at jogging, you kind of need to do it, oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 days a week is really good. Twice a week can work. But to be honest, Crystal and I have both done that. You just get shin splints every time because your body's like, what? This is happening to me again? And your cardiovascular system like basically recedes in a lot of adaptations over a few days if you don't consistently hit it. So lifting is just one of these really pieces of good news. Now, on the other end of that, is like, okay, what if I want to take my physique to the next level? And we do see that in our clients and folks that we help to coach. You know, we have a suite of apps, the RP Diet Coach app, our RP Hypertrophy app. Our user base asks us a lot of questions. And one thing we consistently see with some folks is that they want not pro caliber results, but like much better results, much better results than they're getting. But they oftentimes, I don't know, these are all very well meaning people. They've been maybe a little bit just diluted in a very impolite phrasing, but meant well. They've been kind of lied to low key a little bit by some ads and fads in the fitness industry that, you know, have some steroid using guy on it and be like, you can get all, you know, the best arms you can get in just, you know, 5 minutes a week. And you're like, oh, gee whiz, you know, it's going to take a full send effort. So they look like someone like Jared Feather, who's a professional bodybuilder, and they go, well, what, you know, to get like my version of you with my genetics, how much do I need to work? And I was like, well, you know, Jared Feather, it literally does somewhere between 8 and 10 weekly sessions of lifting. Like that means 2-a-days. And people are like, oh, hell no, I don't want to do that. And you're like, well, that's what it takes. Now, truth be told, to get much better, even if you're very good, you got to go more often than 2 or 3 days a week. It doesn't have to be 8. But I'll tell you this, if you come up to me at the gym and you chat with me and you're like, I'm really struggling to build up my XYZ muscles and I'm really, everything's nailed down, I really want to try. And if I ask you how much you lift, if you tell me you lift 2 or 3 days a week, I'm going to be like, look, man, you need to do more. Now, if you tell me you lift 4 days a week, I'll probably recommend 5 or 6. If you tell me you lift 5 days a week hard for at least an hour at a time, my conversation with you about how much you're lifting probably won't be a big focus. My conversation will be much more on your programming. Are you doing enough volume per muscle group? Are you resting appropriately? Is your technique very good? How's your nutrition? So I would say for me, very serious lifting, very big results. The entry point for that is 5 days a week. Is 4 okay? Yeah, sure. But I'll tell you to go to 5 if you really need more volume. 6 is awesome. And then everything above that is kind of bonus points. Big point here is if you're training 5 days a week, you don't need to necessarily train 6 and 8 to get much better results. But if you're training 4 times a week or less, yeah, more training is going to get you to that next level, whatever that version happens to be for you.
Now, excuse me, you mentioned, you know, training recovery, making sure that you're getting enough rest and recovery. We all know that that's very important. I think some people will go to the other extreme, or maybe their mindset's a different extreme. What is the appropriate amount of rest? And then I guess another part of the question would be, some people fear atrophy once they're getting to a certain point and think that if they take a couple days off, then, you know, their muscles are going to shrink down immediately. And that's, we know that's a kind of a misconception. But how can you speak to that, the appropriate amount of rest and then not fearing atrophy?
Man.
Well, look, I got some bad news on this one. If you put your ears up to your biceps right now, if you're listening to this at home, you'll notice you don't hear anything, and that's because your muscles have already stopped screaming in desperate need of growth. They have just silently resigned themselves to permanent atrophy. You're never going to get big. You're getting smaller as we speak. It just abandon all hope is my best advice. I've abandoned all hope, and look at me. I'm famous and wrote a book. People, you can look, I can speak to this from a very personal perspective.
Same.
Muscle atrophy sounds not just screwed up on an absolute scale, but also like it's unjust. I spent all this time working and then it's just going to go away. And so it's really, really tempting to think, man, you know, I need to train very often in order to give my muscles the signal for growth. But recently, Crystal, you took some time to just pursue competitive jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And tell us about how much less lifting you did than usual and less weight and everything. And tell us about your last few months of muscularity for
Oh
just
gosh. Yeah. So I made the commitment that I wanted to start, competing in jujitsu, and that was going to be my focus, especially after, the last, 4 years of really, losing the COVID weight, getting into shape for photo shoots. So I was really, aside from like, a stage, I was really trying to maximize my physique to, look good for these photos for the last 2 summers. Um, Back then I was training somewhere between 4 and 6 days a week. I think for me, had some, programming recovery issues. So we bumped it to 4, was specializing in everything. And then we moved down to 3 days a week once jujitsu decided to become a priority. Felt like that was too much, and then eventually 2 days a week. And instead of having like my nice, leg day, my push, my pull, it became a full body workout. My weights all dropped in half, which was pretty humbling. The rep ranges, instead of somewhere between 8 and 15, were somewhere between 15 and 25, which is even more humbling because I think for the most part, I'm a fast twitch muscle kind of gal. I like, 6 to 8 reps, heavy reps to grow. It was what grew my legs. And so to kind of do more cardio like stuff, was pretty humbling. And I think, yeah, the most surprising thing was I was expecting my muscles to sort of wither away. And I was pretty much surprised to see how much muscle I still have on. I think it's really strange to kind of see these photos of jujitsu. Yes, things don't look as like sharp. I don't get the same kind of pump or fullness with every set, but I still have, triceps. I still have delts. I still have my quads and even my hamstrings. So, once you build it, it's really it really is surprising to see how little you can do and still maintain it so long as you do something.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah. Once a week training with just a few sets for each muscle group, even if some of those sets are coming from compound movements, which account for multiple muscles,
Yeah.
like bench press takes care of your front delts, triceps, and chest all at the same time. Just a few of those sets a week can actually conserve almost all of your muscularity almost indefinitely. And so if you want to grow muscle, you can train, twice a week, 2 to 4 times per week per muscle, and that's all good to go. But the concern for atrophy is really big in the first week or two because your muscles are no longer kind of inflamed from repeatedly getting beat up. So they kind of shrink down a little bit from that body water effect. But after that, they just kind of remain the same as long as you train them like once a week with minimal volume. So if you're ever going on vacation for a few weeks or something, or you have really busy work stuff, just get in the gym, lift hard and heavy once a week for your whole body. It'll take you like 30 minutes, maybe 45, and then you just pretty much won't lose any meaningful muscle. And whatever muscle you do lose a little bit of, after coming back to the gym within 2 or 3 weeks, it's all going to be back. You'll be resensitized, you'll be healthy, your joints will be feeling great. So when you can't make it to the gym very often, just a little bit of the gym here and there, it's just going to be so much better than not going at all. Mostly just for your psychology, because the muscle comes back one way or another. But if you're consistent and you never stop, you just reduce your sessions, coming back to that fitness lifestyle is easier because you kind of never left.
Okay. Uh, Very good there. So we mentioned a little bit, the time commitment that goes into, especially if you want those huge gains, if you really want to dive into this. There is a section in the book on posing. So I know there are people that are interested in actually stepping on stage. For people who aren't familiar with that, can you speak to the preparation that actually goes into that? I've never done it. I have friends who have, and that's just a completely different mindset.
It's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
I've tried it and it's hard. That's all I have to say
Yeah.
about that.
It's really hard when you try it for once or a few times because you have this vision of your head maybe of how you're supposed to look, and then you look in the mirror and that's just not how it looks, and it doesn't have a whole lot to do with your body. It just kind of where you're placing your limbs and what you're arching and what you're retracting and what you're sticking out, and how close things are, about how far away they are from your body. That is the kind of science and art of posing. And there's kind of a science of posing where you can take the artistic elements and break them down in kind of dependable qualities. Like, for example, in almost every pose, you're going to want to make sure to do at least a few things. I can just list a few of them offhand.
Mm-hmm.
One is every muscle that's visible to the crowd needs to be attended to. It either needs to be stretched on purpose or flexed or both at the same time so that it looks really good. People will do like a front double biceps pose where they raise their arms, but beginners will just contract their biceps, not realizing that their lats are on display, their quads are on display, their abs are on display. And so they forget everything else exists. And so that's a big underlying principle of like, make sure to attend to everything. What's really tough, that's like ballerina level of control. You have to like figure out how it feels to even flex your glutes. Then you do that, but you have to do that without unflexing your hamstrings, which is really hard all the way down the line.
Yeah.
Another one is to make sure that in every pose, especially poses in which it's possible to do this, you want to minimize the size of your waist, of the apparent silhouette of your waist as seen from the crowd, and maximize the silhouette of your shoulders. So that means that, you could have quite a small waist and quite big shoulders, but if you're standing all wrong, you just kind of look pretty normal. But if you do some kind of tricks of posing, if you turn your body the right way, if you suck in the things that need sucking in, then all of a sudden your waist looks teeny tiny and your shoulders look really big and broad, your chest looks really big. And, Arnold actually kind of described posing as like the illusion. It's the art of illusion. And I wouldn't say it's illusion in a nefarious way. It's just kind of putting your best foot forward and positioning your body in such a way that creates a very aesthetic look for the people looking, which means maximizing shoulder width, minimizing waist width, and making sure that you're attending to all the right muscles. The other thing is where you're positioning your limbs in space is another big deal.
Okay.
There are certain ways to position your limbs which look better than others, almost universally. For example, on a front double bicep, if you take your elbows and you bring them down a lot and you do this, you kind of look like you're hiding yourself. It doesn't look expansive like a big cobra. If you put your arms too high above your head, it looks kind of absurd. You again look thinner. If you put your elbows out and up just a little bit, really expand. If you don't let your arms come out too far, you bring them in, you have this great combination of a very expansive look, but simultaneously a nice big contraction of the biceps to make it look nice and round. And that is good general advice, but the real big problem is as an individual practicing posing, you're shaped a little differently than everyone else. And so having a posing coach really helps because that person can watch you pose like on Zoom or something and can say, okay, bring your left elbow up a little bit. Now that's what we want. You take a picture of that, you look at it for a while, you try to hit the same shot in the mirror a few times a week, you get back to your posing coach later, he's like, that looks great, let's attend to something else. And that process keeps repeating such that for posing, the stuff we have in the book is really pretty good advice, I think, but it's the starter pack. It's the rocket fuel to getting you to practice the poses consistently with alterations so that eventually you're altering less and less and less. Your poses look better and better and better. And then when you go out and you actually pose, whether it's for a photo shoot or just a gym selfie or for a bodybuilding stage, you hit the pose just like you're supposed to. It looks great. It looks well practiced. And it looks like, oh, wow, like this really makes your body look the best it can versus having a body that's amazing and then the posing sucks and you're like, oh man, you're just kind of not really showing off your body enough. It's like, sending someone out saying, hey, look, hey, girlfriend, I want you to meet this guy friend of mine. He's really into you. He thinks you're beautiful in the face. And she kind of cover up her whole face the whole time. It's like, but this is the thing we want to show, no? And it just might not be a thing that people know. I think a lot of people think posing is this thing I just do. And if I look like a bodybuilder, sort of, then it accomplishes the task. But the reason bodybuilders have their poses is because those poses are specifically chosen to make the physique look beautiful in a special way. And if you understand what you're emphasizing and de-emphasizing in a pose, you can hit that pose really well. If you're just up there moving around like I am when I'm posing because I don't practice enough, you're going to embarrass yourself. People are going to make fun of you. You're going to cry a lot.
I think that really speaks to just how much preparation goes into something like that. Not only do you have to obviously make sure you're lifting correctly, your programming's on par, posing, diet, everything that goes into it. So nuanced to get all parts of that together at the same time. So I have one more question for you. some of the biggest errors that you've seen people make in their preparation, or maybe what a big hurdle that it's tough for people to get over?
Oh, well,
What do you think,
briefly.
Crystal?
Especially for my kind of population, I think I feel like bodybuilding is this natural progression along people's like sort of health and wellness journey. And I don't think people, and it just sort of seems like you lost all this weight. Like, when's the show coming up? I've even had people ask me that, and it's like it's not just one does not simply step on stage. And I think there's also just not just being physically ready, but psychologically ready. We're already coming into this journey of figuring out who you are. You've lost a lot of weight, confidence, and whatnot, and now you're going to elect to stand on stage wearing hardly anything, and have people judge you. At the end of the day, like that's exactly what you're signing up for. So I think a lot of people just don't really stop to think of not just the physical cost, the actual monetary cost, because all that coaching stuff costs money, and then also is this something that I really want to do? Do I really want to stand up and be judged for my physique when I could just lose the weight? I could also just create the physique that I want and not have to subject myself to all of this other stuff that goes into bodybuilding prep.
Yeah, that's really well put. It's a serious thing, and it's very exposing in the literal sense. And so you kind of want to dot your I's and cross your T's. One recommendation I have for folks that I've never really taken myself, it should, is to get really in bodybuilding shape, stage shape, and then know what it takes to get there, and then kind of bulk your way back out of it a little bit, rest for a few months, maintain, keep training, and then do another diet. This time you know a lot more about how it works. This time you already know where you've been, and then you can focus on that diet on really specifics, really nailing the posing and the prep and the color and the hair removal and all that stuff, presentation, because now you know how to get the physique to do what it's supposed to do. Now you can focus on all the other stuff, and it's just a much less stressful situation. And speaking of stress, the other thing I've noticed is a lot of people who are very hardworking, type A type of folks, they're like, oh, I want to do a bodybuilding show and I'm going to do everything else on top of it, my normal career, blah, 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 all the stuff. And I've done that a whole bunch. And that doesn't work as great as it could because the stressors all kind of accumulate. And then what you want is to really focus a little bit more, even if it means the last few weeks, taking a little bit of time away from work or doing less work, doing some more rest, more sleep, and really relaxing a ton because bodybuilding is all hardcore and everything, but the best way to get good at bodybuilding is to find the entire experience as joyful and as relaxing and stress-free as possible. Obviously, lifting is very stressful. Everything else should be as minimally stressful as possible. Some folks think, oh, it's hardcore. I'm going to even work more. I'm going to take more client load on and all this stuff. And it ends up being that there's a reason pro athletes have sponsors, and that's so they can just focus on the act of being a pro athlete and not have to work in a conventional job for a living. And that's a big deal.
Very well said by both of you. Excellent information. I knew this was going to be a very intriguing conversation that everyone was going to appreciate. Bodybuilding Anatomy, you guys have 68 exercises, 12 competition poses, like you mentioned. You include common lifting errors, some of them that we talked about. You explain how to choose your exercises based on your goals and needs. So much information in one book. If you haven't got your copy yet, for everyone listening, definitely go ahead and grab it. It's on our Human Kinetics website, us.humankinetics.com. It's on Amazon, probably a number of other places that I'm going to forget if I try to list all of them. So again, thank you guys so much. I will give you guys the last word though to kind of wrap up our conversation. And I know you guys are all over the place, but make sure to let everyone know kind of where they can find you and keep learning from you.
On Instagram, Dr.Christle, Christle, and then also I think Michael talked about the YouTube channel for more, kind of information about lifting and getting jacked.
Yeah, RP Strength on YouTube, Renaissance Periodization. If you just type in Dr. Mike, I'll no doubt pop up. And we just talk about kind of evidence-based lifting strategies to get people more muscular and leaner and healthier in whatever amount of time they want to allot to it. So start on YouTube and find the rest of our stuff from there. And if you guys want to pick up the book, it makes a great gift. It's heavy, it's large. You can hit someone with it. It makes a great weapon. So it's a multi-purpose book. You can even read it if you like, though reading hurts my head and I just don't do it much. But if you're into that sort of thing, the book has plenty of letters and even words.
Yeah.
Also, lots of pictures, which is real good.
Lots of pictures, very descriptive. That is a good point. I mean, it is bodybuilding anatomy, but people can actually see the muscles that they're working through, which I think a lot of people are visual, so I definitely think that helps out. So again, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.